Voice. Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. President. Good afternoon, fellow members of this Honourable House. I've had the distinct pleasure of observing the speeches both in the other place and where we sit, and rise at the tail end of the discussion, or more the middle order, on the last day. Now, when you find yourself speaking after lunch, you're always cognizant that being West Indian, you need time to warm up a bit. So I would ask the President's indulgence if I get off to a slow start.
Many great innings started slowly, you know.
Indeed, Mr. President. Hopefully this will be one of the same. Now, sir, I have noted with interest the various perspectives. Some range from frantic admiration to blistering criticism. And I'm reminded of the story of the couple and the donkey. And they were heading into town. Both were riding the creature. And persons observing say, "Why are you riding the donkey?" Two persons on a donkey is traumatic for the animal. Listening to the observers, the husband got off and the wife proceeded on the donkey. They went a bit further down and some other observers say, "Hold on. Why are you walking, good man, while your wife rests? You should ride, you work hard, let her walk." So they listened to the persons who they were hearing, and the husband got on and the wife proceeded to walk and lead the animal. Another group saw the husband seated on the donkey and the wife leading the donkey and said, "What a cruel person you are, having your wife toiling in the sun while you relax on the beast of burden." So invariably, and I won't get to the conclusion of what happened to the donkey. So invariably, sir, we find that there's always a range of opinions to any position that is put forward. But I want to start with the simple, undisputed facts. The government must be commended for its efforts, don't just clap just yet, its efforts in achieving a reduction in the domestic debt. That's a fact. If you're moving from 170% of GDP to 125 in the time frame that was done, it certainly warrants recognition and appreciation of what it took. Certainly the participation of the public and the willingness of the bondholders, some say patriotic, Senator Franklin will say pressured, I wouldn't venture there. However you want to describe the motivation, the point is it was achieved. And though I am loath to say the ends justify the means, I believe the country stands in a better position. And I would like the government senators to keep that same energy for the duration of the speech, Mr. President.
You're just warming up.
Now, it is hopeful that the subgroup of bondholders, which includes the pensioners, who were to be provided with short-term funds promised to be paid in this month, as well as November last year, would be soon satisfied, because my understanding is that all have not been taken care of. And one of the questions I would like to leave with this Honourable House, and if I can have a response for someone on the government side, is if there could be any directions given to pensioners, pension bondholders who find themselves without any interim payment being made in November and in March of this month, who or what office they should contact to get some remedy. That is my first request for the government side this afternoon. The second issue in relation to the budget, and this was a quote taken, an observation taken from the government website, and they are doing a commendable job of keeping the creditors updated, is while we recognize the gains in the reduction of the local debt, we have not been able to satisfy our external creditors. And this quote taken from the last creditor update, which is dated January 23rd, 2019, starts off very promisingly, as it indicates that the CDB and IADB approved policy loans have both been granted and disbursed 100 million and 75 million USD, along with the IMF disbursing a further 49 million. Now, I'm not too up to date with the figures, Mr. President, but this has provided import cover of some 13.5 weeks, which is well above the 12-week benchmark required. You can get the report. The concern, though, sir, and we do recognize that we always borrow for the most part to meet this obligation, is, and I am quoting from the government's website, so again, you must be commended when you give the good news as well as the bad. And the government has been very frank with the people of Barbados, and they state, worryingly, however, is the fact that indicates that after factoring in the non-payment of the US denomination commercial debt since June 2018, the situation remains fragile. Meaningful recovery of international reserves will require further progress on the reforms envisaged in the BERT plan and EFF, and will be predicated on a sustainable resolution of the external debt overhang. Translation, things are a bit shaky in the external debt regard, so while we certainly are pleased, and when I use that pronoun, I refer to the Barbadian public, we are also cautious, and I think the government is doing a good job to let us know to be cautious in relation to the external debt, sir. But it all can't be fixed in one day. Now, a quick snapshot, and I'm referencing, I think Senator Adams referred to the various Big Four in their account summary, so I'm referring to the one that was produced from the KPMG Group commentary report. When we look at the snapshot provided, so as we said, debt to GDP is 125%, 13.5 weeks import cover, 1.1 billion in foreign reserves, very good, borrowed, and a 3% account surplus. This, to me, without any form of economic training, seems to be a good position, certainly an improved position where we were when we started the sitting in this house. So when we look at the backdrop of where the country finds itself, I think we can say objectively that Barbados is in a better position. Keep that energy. So we now proceed to look at a different aspect, and we break down, for my part, an attempt to break down the different budgetary recommendations, and I will proceed to give my commentary on the same. The first aspect I would like to speak to, Mr. President, is the corporation tax and the reduced withholding tax. That is the tax on dividends, as well as the anti-abuse measures that were put in place. So, Mr. President, my understanding is that if a company makes $100 in profit, if you're a non-national who is receiving dividends from that company, you will get, and your dividend is, let's say, $100, to make it easy for the lawyers in here who can't do math, like myself. Let's say you were supposed to get $100 in your dividend, you will still get your $100 with no deduction if you're a non-resident. However, if you are a resident who is receiving a dividend, there is an increased tax from 12.5% to 15% on the dividend that you earn. So this seems to be an attempt to harmonize the dividend on the income from the companies that will be incorporated to take advantage of the new company reduced tax rate, and as well as to harmonize the tax rate from dividends from these corporations, as well as the existing reduction in the income tax band. This, I believe, sir, can generally be said to be positive, and along with the proposed anti-abuse measures, which I really don't understand, but I understand they deal with the sophisticated investor, should put increased coffers in the government pockets. The second area I would like to focus on, sir, is the aspect of the income tax. And in this regard, I'd like to cite my sources. So I've mentioned the government website, the KPMG report. I came across the Twitter profile of the head of the Barbados Economic Society, Mr. Nitram, who gave a very nice snapshot and did his calculations based on what the income tax proposals and how it would affect the taxpayer who pays PAYE. And this is viewed, sir, as generally positive and definitely welcomed, because you're seeing a reduction in taxes for most persons. Clap, clap. However, within this band, there is one group between 55 to 89,000 who unfortunately have had a minor increase in taxes when you look at the curve. Now, I understand that they will also get the benefit of reduced housing tax, because this group seems to be benefiting from the reduced taxes on houses in the region of $450,000. So generally, from the income tax perspective, most Barbadians can say that they will be getting an ease. The proof of the pudding, of course, remains in the eating or in the picking. Now, when we go down the chain, however, we recognize that the persons who are earning less than $1,500 a month will be the ones who will be impacted by the proposed bus fare increase, and they were already not being taxed, so we realize that they will end up being worse off. But we do recognize there is an attempt to balance, so you take the good with the bad. But in examining the reduction in income tax, the majority of persons will see a reduced tax rate. Unfortunately, those at the bottom of the end will be impacted by other factors, and I'll come to those shortly. Definitely, the upper income earners will see a significant reduction, and maybe it is the hope that this would lead to more money in the economy, and then we have some trickle-down economics, but I will let Senator Drake speak to that when she gets the opportunity. Hopefully, there will be more spending as consumer confidence increases, and this should then lead to an improvement in the situation regarding the circulation of money. So all in all, my personal view is that the income tax proposal is to be welcomed, and everyone likes to get a reduction in tax. Unfortunately, there is that subgroup who will get a slight increase, and those at the bottom of the scale have not had any benefit, and their earnings will be eroded by the increased taxes, which weren't dealt with in the budgetary speech, except for the buses, but they will be affected by the water, they will be affected by the fuel, they will be affected by the sewage. So that's something to consider, sir. However, overall, the reduction in income tax rates is to be welcomed. I realize the applause has gotten a little quiet. Now, other significant measures I'd like to comment on. The gaming tax, I think, was certainly well done. And it's one of those areas which I think most Barbadians will say you can tax them as far within reason, because I think we all share the idea that this is to be considered as disposable income. Now, unfortunately, there are families who will be affected when you have persons who are addicted and might be doing it with resources they should not be utilizing, and there's always that case. However, at the end of the day, I think it is a very prudent move by the government, and I would not describe it as how Senator Franklin did. I think that was somewhat unfair. And it really is a tax which will give the government some room to increase its revenue. With regard to the hotel rooms, I think this one is a little trickier. My understanding of the Honourable Prime Minister's position is that they've been working closely with the hotel sector. And if that is the case, it should also be commended. The increase 7.5 to 10% in terms of a room rate levy should not be a significant impact, but we will have to wait and see. Monitoring is, of course, urged, because then we also have the result of the proposed increase in VAT for the hotel industry. Seeing this is one of our major economic contributors, I would always recommend that we monitor this closely to see if it's having any impact on our arrivals. And I noticed with interest, again, Senator Drake's, the figures with regard to the tourism production, or the tourism figures for the past year, the decline in 2018. This, coupled along with the increase in airfare tax, may warrant close monitoring, so I would urge the government to keep an eye to make sure that we're not putting the goose at risk. On the issue of water, Mr. President, the increase in commercial water rates, will this be passed on? I'll leave that right there. I think we have a clear history of behavior with regard to human and economic behavior is well tracked, sir. We can only hope that with the corporate savings, this would lead to some absorption, but time, as always, will tell. The increase in water for commercial utilization, along with the increased fuel tax, may play a role in increasing the cost to consumers. So again, this will have to be carefully monitored, as it could potentially impact the most vulnerable. Bus fare. And I want to take a pause here, because I think it's unfair, the criticism that has been received and leveled at the government because of the increase. I think we all need to bear responsibility and acknowledge the part that we have played as a Barbadian society for the Transport Board in the position which it finds itself. It didn't start recently. It didn't start in the past 10 years. The problem with the Transport Board has gone back several administrations. And if we are frank, sir, and we're honest with ourselves, we need to recognize where we could have been stronger and we could have been more efficient in certain decisions. But we learn and we progress, sir. So we recognize that while this has to be done, persons will be hit hard. And the persons who will be hit hard, we recognize, are the ones who are at the lower spectrum of the economic ladder. So instead of condemning the government, maybe the cry should be, let's all do our part.
Yes.
And let's all, wherever possible, and it may sound like a cliche, but you could give someone a lift. If you know persons in your neighborhood who are going to certain areas, you can help out where you can. Employers should, if at all possible, with the savings in the corporate tax ban, make some allocations for an increase. Share the wealth and recognize. I personally am aware of what steps we are taking in my family for those persons who assist us in this regard or have taken. The concept of transfers should also be looked at, as this will certainly mitigate. Unfortunately, buying in bulk to reduce the price of the ticket may be hard for persons whose weekly take-home is $250 to $300. That's just a fact in terms of the reality on the ground. But I really think it's unfair to be so vehement in condemning the existing government for something that everyone knew was coming and had to be done to rationalize the operation of the transportation system. Land tax. I'll spend some time here because I think Barbados already ranks pretty high up on the scale, and this is purely anecdotal, of taxes for land based on observing the Trinidadians and the Jamaicans in this regard and the other territories in the Caribbean. The Trinidadians had a near riot with the concept of even paying tax on properties. I don't think they've been able to resolve the issue. And when I inquired to a very close family member as to what the figure was that was causing the consternation, I was told it was $400. A Barbadian will wish to get land tax bill for $400. Bajan. But it just shows when you're not accustomed to something, how you react to the introduction. And we as a country have dealt with land tax for a long time. And I think the aim of the Prime Minister and the government is to make sure that it was distributed in a way that it impacts those who have the ability to pay and help those who are on the lower property scale. So if you have a house for less than $450,000, you're pretty well off. If you have a house for more than that, you have to pay an increase without going into the details of the different land and unoccupied land. Going back to the government's intention to focus more on taxing assets to encourage the development of income. However, as always, some persons will be negatively impacted, as in those who may have inherited their property, which may be a high-end property, sir, and who do not have the income level to support the increase. We know that we as Barbadians do not buy land to speculate. We buy land to hold. Hug up. Buy property. I don't hear about Barbadians going out there and speculating and secondary housing and flipping houses. We watch that on TV. Bajans don't rush to sell property in that secondary market. But that aside, there's another socioeconomic consideration. And that is that the acquisition of land still holds a romantic ideal, sir, for Barbadians. The piece of the rock. And if I was trained like Senator Springer to speak to the historic or the educational aspect of it, and what would drive us to seek to acquire the same, it may go way back. Being disenfranchised and unable to have something, you set your hopes on acquiring it for yourself and your family. And so for a lot of professionals, it's one of the only ways to achieve capital, sir. And hopefully create your own legacy, which could be subsequently converted into income. Those of us here who deal with the financing recognize that every major transaction is underpinned with property. It's the only real asset the majority of us could hope to own, and therefore the utilization of it to increase our families' fortunes or assist where we can in the development or creation of whatever we wish is underpinned on the ability to own something and subsequently utilize it to achieve our dreams. Having to pay increased taxes on this is recognized as a need, but I think when we think about the socioeconomic impact, we may hopefully in the future see a reduction. It's a good form of forced savings, could be considered a savings bank. But it almost seems that if you have a dream of acquiring a certain amount of land to try to remedy some of the historic inequalities, you might find yourself being pushed back once again, sir. but we hope and trust that we will see better. And we understand why it is needed in the short term. Now, there are some exciting innovations, Mr. President. And for this, the government should be commended. Digital currency, and I've heard Senator Adams speak with regard to the cost savings of its uptake. We look forward to this. I know some of the commercial powerhouses may be a bit skeptical, but at the end of the day, I believe that Barbados wins if we increase our digital footprint and helps us to improve our efficiency and our skill set with regard to financial sophistication. Peer-to-peer lending. Certainly, this should improve those who face challenges with access to finance for micro and small enterprises, and along with crowdfunding, which allows for certain social causes to be taken up. And again, as we call on Barbadians to do their part, these are the tools which could be utilized in this endeavor. I recently read the report for Mr. Justin Ram, of the director of the CDB, Dr. Justin Ram. I'm sorry, we are schoolmates from Presentation College Trinidad, so forgive the lack of formality, for which I do apologize. Dr. Justin Ram, while speaking on a recent conference, gave some indication that we need to be aware of the socioeconomic impact in terms of its correlation with crime. So hopefully these ventures allow us to provide some avenue for youthful entrepreneurs to deal with the various issues which we find ourselves having to assist. And actually, I want to join at this point in commending Senator Rogers for his apology to the youth of the nation, recognizing that as we take collective responsibility for what we have failed to do, that we need to make some maybe hard or maybe easy decisions to seek to correct the course. Sir, the concept of green energy bonds, I think I understand it, and it sounds exciting and a good place to put your money. And let's see how it gets launched. I am intrigued with the idea of incentives for water-saving utensils, and I think this should certainly be encouraged, and not just limited to water, but also for other forms of utilities, gas and electricity. Crime and security, Mr. President. Certainly a topical area, and in listening to the Honourable Prime Minister's presentation and in having certain conversations, sir, I think we can be comforted that the government is allocating as much as possible funding to address the issue. My understanding is that there's going to be a region of $70 million, which we do need to deal with the port and the police and the law enforcement divisions who battle every day to keep us safe. The situation in Venezuela is having an impact on Trinidad, which means it will have a potential impact, more likely than not, on us. Like our ancestors did, these things move up the chain. And we have to be mindful, along with what we are currently dealing with, that we have to work with our neighbors in this regard. So I am satisfied that the budget is necessary to find the monies to deal with this scourge, and that the government is allocating the adequate resources to do the same. I certainly want to let the government know that the people of Barbados, even if I wouldn't call for more taxes, but any allocation that is necessary to deal with the issue of security should certainly be given the utmost priority. Now, as we come to the end of this short speech, Mr. President, I have a wish list. I have a wish list. And, you know, I heard the Honourable Prime Minister, and I heard the other members of the other place, and I heard the fellow senators, and I say, and everybody's talking about what was done. I'm saying, oh, this is what I want. This is what I want from the government, and this is what I want for the people of Barbados. So if someone on the government side will take a note, and you know, they say ask and you shall receive. You understand? Or you ask a question, that's how you learn. Firstly, sir, the return of allowances. We understand the difficulty, but I've said it in this house before. When I first started to practice, you were allowed to get tax incentives for mutual funds, you're allowed to get tax incentives for IPO, you're allowed to get tax incentives for retirement plans. It was a good time to start and encourage to put your money in different avenues. Yes, sir. I would wish for an optimized BRA with all the resources that they could shake a stick at to go out there and get those who may be a little naughty in what they're doing. And with the right money to pay those who can assist. I would love to second persons like Senator Sands and send them down there and give them the appropriate salary to assist them with the endeavors. I would wish for the returns to be paid. I would wish for the returns to be paid. And I understand that they are coming forth and we are very grateful. But until they're paid, it still remains a wish at this stage. I would wish for the bondholders to be paid. It is something which has impacted, I think, everyone, from retirement to existing to even personal plans. But we do recognize that we all have to play our part, and it's a sacrifice I believe everyone is willing to make. For now, I would also wish for the government to play nice with the banks. At the end of the day, we are in this together. I read a report of a certain statement made during the negotiations, and I, for my part, would think that in negotiations, things tend to sometimes get expressed in a way that, while it captures the moment, doesn't capture the end result. And I would urge the government and the banks to come together and find a middle ground, because we need the financing, and the banks need us. And we need to work together for the betterment of Barbados. So that's something that I would wish as well. I would wish for reduction in youth employment, which is currently apparently 1 in 4 at Caribbean average. And for as much as possible, incentives to come forth to engage our bright and beautiful young people who might find themselves now being attracted to other avenues to fulfill their economic or maybe social desires, sir. And finally, I would wish for us to find that way to efficiently share the tax burden. I think the government is certainly trying, but there are persons who will be impacted and who have already been severely impacted. So my wish would be for an efficient and a fair tax system. The group that deals with PAYE have been hit so hard, Mr. President, they have now gotten a little ease. But you know, they've been hit hard, sir, in the past. And we hope that the ease will continue. And we have other professionals and other bodies out there who may not have suffered as much. And we need the skill set and the resources to make sure that everybody pulls together, sir. Because if we all pull together, it makes it a little lighter. All in all, sir, I believe this is a balanced budget. And when you look at it, some was given, some was taken. While we remain concerned of issues, and we've spoken about it, the bus fare, water, fuel, we're going to trust the government's prediction of the proposed increased income and hope for the best. If we band together and pull together, sir, we'll hopefully find our way into a beautiful and brighter Barbados. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. President, I rise in total support, 100% support of this budget. As usual, I will be my usual brief self and not speak for very long, but I will take this opportunity to speak on information. On information, broadcasting, and public affairs, a ministry that oftentimes is not spoken about often, but it certainly is one that has an integral part to play in the development of this country moving forward in a technology age. Information is a valuable tool for any individual and for anyone to have, because it's information that is what we use in order to formulate our ideas and decisions as what we do in our daily lives. Now, the Ministry of Information has several departments under it, and I think some people are not aware of them. So I'll take this opportunity just to give a very brief background of these departments and what some of them do, as well as to speak a little bit on what they will do going forward. Now, the departments under information are the Barbados Government Information Service, which many people refer to as GIS. There's also the Division of Public Affairs, the Government Printing Department, and the Barbados Broadcasting Authority, which is a regulatory agency that falls within the ministry, as well as a statutory body, the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, that most people refer to as CBC. Now, these entities are all information related, and they deliver information in varied ways, with some overlap, I do say, simply because information always will have that. No matter what you do to try to keep it as streamlined as possible, there will always be some level of overlap. Now, information is delivered through these entities in several ways: via the print media and the printing press of GIS, via radio, television, and social media, broadcasting, but via the same social media, television, and radio. And of course, we then have the Public Affairs Division, which basically engages Barbadians, what we term citizen engagement, town hall meetings, monitoring of what happens within our society with regard to information. So that's just a very basic background of what is done by these entities. So at this point, Mr. President, I will go into a little more detail as to where we see this and where it's going. Now, as I said a few minutes ago, we believe that information has a critical role to play in the transformation of our society. We believe that the government is moving Barbados into a modern age, into a modern society, bringing the country fully into the 21st century, into a technology-based society. And information, as I previously said, plays a critical role. Years ago, when we thought about, say, media, we thought basically of radio, television, and newspaper. That's how most people were able to get news or any type of information as to what was happening, whether locally or worldwide. Then, of course, you had your occasional town hall meeting. Every once in a while, something really major comes up, and you bring people to town hall meeting to reinforce whatever they may have heard on a peripheral level through the three medium that I just spoke about. Now, and they primarily inform the public and use these opportunities for people to ventilate critical issues of public concern. But the world has changed. So the world is no longer just about television and about radio and about newspapers. As a matter of fact, there are many people who will tell you they've never read an actual newspaper. Never read it. They can tell you what's in it because someone has told them what's in it, but they never actually read it themselves, certainly not in its print form. I remember speaking to a very young relative a couple of years ago in her mid-20s, and she told me, she said, you know, I've never read a newspaper except online. So she's never read a paper, actually read it. She's read the paper, but only online, only on her computer or her iPad. She's never actually bought any of the local papers, or any paper for that matter, except it was online. So I say this to explain that Barbados has always been seen as one of the leaders in most sectors within our Caribbean community. And information was one where we were one of the leading players in this. Years ago, we had CBC television, way back in the early 1960s. The Government Information Service since the late 1950s, where many other islands did not have it. But what has happened here, in my view, is what has happened in many other aspects of our government and governance, where we have not perhaps progressed at the rate that perhaps we should have. And so we are no longer necessarily the leaders within the Caribbean, certainly not, in my view, in this sector. Why is this? For several reasons. One of them is that many of the entities, certainly within the government sector, that were entrusted to perform these services have been starved of resources, starved of equipment, starved of personnel. And in instances where they were not starved or lacked resources, there would have been a level of mismanagement. Why do I say mismanagement? I think I can say that without any fear of contradiction. When you have an entity in the information sector that is over $100 million in debt, I do not believe that that is prudent management. I've spoken about that before, and I'm speaking about it again. It could not possibly have been. There is no way that any entity in a country of 300,000 people, give or take, could find the money to pay back over $100,000. $100 million, sorry. $100 million, Mr. President. It's just not possible. Most people within the media environment make their revenue from advertising. There's not enough advertising in Barbados to tackle $100 million. Not possible. But nevertheless, we are moving on, and we are going to correct many of these issues that have confronted us by taking prudent decisions to ensure that all of the information entities that fall under the government's purview will be able to not incur this level of debt. Now, when years ago, if someone went to, and I just want to talk a little bit about the need for technology and equipment and why it's so necessary. Gone are the days when you go to a press conference with a pen and a notebook. If you're running to a press conference with a pen or a notebook, you're not informing anyone. There's a whole segment of society that will never know what is happening in their own country if that's what you're going there with. certainly anyone under the age of 30, many of them are not going to read anything written down and typed up that you've formulated using a notebook and a pen. They are going to get their information by some type of technology. So what does that require? It then requires the entities to be able to disperse their message and enlighten the public by having the ability to be able to have the technology that is required in order to deliver their message. Technology, when it comes to media, when it comes to informing the public, when it comes to engaging the public, when it comes to allowing your citizens to know what is happening to them, technology has had the greatest impact on our ability to deliver that message. And everyone needs to understand that, including us. And when I say us, I'm talking about the government. And when I say the government, I don't necessarily mean the government as a minister of government, but the government as a sector needs to understand that when you are trying to engage people, you certainly need to use the technology to engage people of a certain age. If you do not do this, you are going to leave a whole generation of people outside of whatever message it is that you're trying to deliver. Now, I am not suggesting that government can keep abreast with the private sector in terms of being able to do this technology-wise, because governments never have the level of revenue that it takes that sometimes private entities do. And so they too have an important part to play in this endeavor, because oftentimes they have greater access to equipment and greater access to markets that sometimes government entities don't always have. But nevertheless, the government still has a responsibility, and it must ensure that that responsibility is adhered to and not be afraid to move information squarely into the 21st century. Now, as I said, think about anything that we do in our lives. Many people get up in the morning, they go and read the newspaper, especially people over 50. They're probably gonna go and read the newspaper. They get up, they read the daily newspapers. Some of them go and turn on the radio and they listen to whatever news, because they know the times the news comes on, 7:30, 8 o'clock, depending on what their station they're listening to. Some of them like to, the Bajans, many Barbadians like to listen to the notices of, obituaries. Thank you, obituaries. The obituaries, they're very popular. We like to know. Old people, they get up, they turn it on, and they want to find out, and they listen, and they listen, and they listen. When I engage some elderly people, they ask me, do you know so-and-so has passed on? I'm like, no. And they'll ask me, but don't you know that so-and-so's sister, John so-and-so's brother's wife's first child? That's the way in which we express ourselves, but clearly it's something that we listen to. So we know how to reach people of a certain generation, and we clearly do, because it has been shown that they are getting the message. They know exactly where to go: newspaper, radio, obits, and then of course when 7 o'clock comes and you go to the house, they go on the evening news, and they're watching the CBC evening news at 7 o'clock, and that's people of a certain generation. 7 o'clock, can't miss them. They got to run quick and turn on the news. No, there's no more Days of Our Lives, but in the Days of Our Lives, that was the same thing. I will just give you all this little joke. A politician told me in the early days when I first came around politics, he told me that he went canvassing one day, and he went to a lady's house and knocked on the door. It was 7:15. And the lady told him, that better be Dr. Horton. So she clearly did not want to speak to him. Days of Our Lives was on, leave, But the evening news does have its viewership, and many people tune in to see what's on there. Thank you. Now, so what I'm trying to say here is that it should be noted that information is only valuable if it's received by the intended audience. That's the only value. If you are trying to reach a particular group of people, it is only valuable if you're reaching that group. So we know how to reach the group of people like me. I'm over 50. Just barely, in my mind. in my mind. But it is only valuable if it's received by intended audience. So as a result, the medium that we use and that's available to be used must reach as wide an audience as possible. And so, as I said earlier, if we want to ensure that the entire population is informed and knows what is transparent within their own country, if they want to know what government's policies are, if they want to know and understand what is happening on a daily basis to them, we have to use all of the other available mediums that exist today. So what does that mean? Social media. It can't just be TV and newspaper and radio alone. We have to also embrace that technology and use it in order to disperse our message. Many entities here do that. If you look at any of the daily newspapers, and there are two that use the original print format, newspaper form print. But they themselves also deliver their messages on a electronic platform. So you can see those, the exact same thing you see when you pick up that paper. You can actually go on your computer, on your cell phone, on your iPad, or any electronic platform and read the identical papers. You have some now, one or two, who only use electronic platforms in order to deliver their message. And why would someone who's printed something use an electronic platform? Because they don't just want to reach me, they also want to reach younger people. And they have long recognized that if they do not do that, they are not going to reach that audience. And so therefore, as a government, and certainly for our entities and information, we too use those platforms, or try to. The Government Information Service, they have a social media platform, several of them. CBC, Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, they too have been using it to varying degrees. Now, the Government Information Service, as I said when I first started to speak, many government entities have been starved over the years of resources, equipment, and Government Information Services is no exception. But they do an extremely commendable job given the limitations of what they have to use. So GIS is tasked with delivering to the Barbadian public what government does, what different government departments, different government ministries, whatever government does, they're entrusted in making sure that that is delivered to the larger population. And they do it because basically they're almost like a public relations firm or clearinghouse, where they then disperse that information to other media houses. They also disperse it themselves on their own platforms. What I can say to you, I must commend them, because they go above and beyond every single day of what they have to do, because they work most of the time, almost every day. Because one thing about news and about information, it never stops. Every day something happens, and they have a responsibility to cover it. There are many different government departments, many different ministries, and so they are extremely busy. They also have to ensure that when they have issues of national importance, they are then the entity that goes and makes sure that Barbadians know what's going on. So let's say, for example, you have an outbreak of dengue. They will do public service announcements to make sure everybody knows what to do, what not to do. Let's say it's a situation where there's rodent infestation. I saw it on the news the other day. They tell you what you need to do, what precautions you should take, and things things like that. So regardless of whether it is straight up what a policy that government has embarked on, or if it's to get people to understand some of the basics of everyday life and what they need to do in order to access, whether it is facilities, whether it is how to deal with a situation, as I just gave you some examples, and there are many, many more. I'm sure many of you have seen the PSAs on CBC television. You hear quite a few of them on the radio, all the radio stations, you'll hear them on, and they will deliver that message. And they do it with very limited resources and very quickly in a great turnaround time. So I can only but commend them for the role that the Government Information Service has been playing in Barbados. And I know, and I can say to you, that I am sure that they will continue to do the excellent job that they have been doing. They've been around for a very long time. Government Information Service has been around since November 1958. I wasn't born yet, and I don't think most people in here were born, but there are one or two that might have been, but the reality is they've been around for a very long time, and I am sure they'll be around for a lot longer because they have principal functions that are critical for any government. I have never been to a Caribbean island that did not have a Government Information Service department. And I can safely say that I consider that ours is one of the best. Now, one of the big concerns that I've heard from Barbadians is they've said, we would like to get some of the information as to what government does, not necessarily quicker, because they can get that in a soundbite on the news. So at all the news stations, if I say today here, we're banning plastics, before I can leave this chamber, one of the media houses has it up, the government is banning plastics. But all you get is a little blurb, something really quick, no real detail, because that's not news. News is something quick that can be digested quickly, and then you turn around to another set of news. The next set of news is some car crash somewhere, and that then it becomes the next headline. So I'm cognizant, and we at the Ministry of Information are cognizant that Barbadians are saying that they would like to have more information on many of the things that government has done and is doing. And going forward, they would like to see that as well. And I'll give you a couple examples so you could understand. If you go on social media or even traditional media, you'll see that there are people saying, oh, we want to know more about the ban on plastics. Right? Or they'll say, we want to know more about the online transactions. That's been another big one. You know, we want to know more. Yes, we hear it's going on, but what exactly are the details? Well, what I can say is, and there are many more, and there will be many more. Because if government is moving Barbados into a modern society, into a different technology-based society, it then requires letting people know in detail what is happening so that there's no confusion. What happens when you do not give people detail? It then degenerates into incorrect information. I think people talk a lot about fake news and alternative facts and all those kind of things. And that's exactly what happens. So we are going to ensure that we continue to provide as much information as we can through the same Government Information Service, through the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, all of the radio stations in Barbados that fall under the Broadcasting Authority, which all of them do, where people will then be able to hear and understand what these policies are all about, so people can understand clearly what is required of them and that there's no misunderstandings. Because if you leave it to other people to do, you will get that fake news, alternative facts, and all the other things that are mass confusion. So half the time, I remember years ago, people said, when social media first came around, oh, social media is going to kill off mainstream media. That's what they said. In the United States, they said, oh, social media is going to kill off the 4 free-to-air media outlets in the United States, the 4 networks. But it didn't. It actually strengthened them. Why? Because of the alternative facts and the fake news. If a person really wanted to know in the US if something was real, whether they went to a social media platform or use a traditional media platform, they went to the tried and proven media because they knew that it was then probably correct and true, and not something made up by somebody who just threw something up on one of the platforms and purported it to be factual. So we are well aware of that here, and we will ensure that we continue to fulfill our role in keeping Barbadians informed as to what's happening. So we will use all of the resources available to us, whether it's GIS, the Printry, Public Affairs, CBC, what have you. I think I can say that we also will try to do, because I really believe in this, more engagement of citizens. Not necessarily in the old town hall format style, which has its benefits, and we will do those, but also some more innovative styles to engage people, which you will see and hear about as we roll it out. Because there's nothing like interacting with people face-to-face and one-on-one for them to truly understand what you're speaking about. Now, the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, some Barbadians even refer to it as the Pine. Though when I think of the Pine, I don't necessarily think of CBC, but I've heard it said. But the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation is a statutory body that falls under the ministry. It has a board, it has employees, and some very good and talented employees. CBC has been around for a very long time. And it, as a matter of fact, one of the first free-to-air stations in the Caribbean. Some extremely good workers, I can say that without hesitation. What I will say is, I believe that they probably have had some challenges over the years. But what I can say, too, is that they are talented, they know what they're doing, and I am sure that everyone here has seen some of the changes that have been taking place there. If you watch the news, you will see there's a new news format which embraces some of the things that I just spoke about earlier. You will see that they have a social media part to the news where you can actually go, it's about just, I don't know, maybe about 10, 15 minutes within news, and you will get a chance to see, they call it What's Trending. And they will then tell you what people are talking about on social media. But do not forget that social media is a platform which tends to be interactive. So you may dispense information, but people have a chance to respond or reply or repost and a whole host of things. So it's interactive. So What's Trending talks about the things that Barbadians are watching or speaking about, and that is an aspect of the new CBC news format. You will also see that they have a different set, a more modern set, where you're able to see a similar set that you cannot see in many other countries, but certainly one that brings CBC squarely into 2019. CBC Radio, too, has had some changes. They do have your call-in programs 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. And those call-in programs also have a feature for radio that's widely used by many radio stations worldwide, where not only do you get a chance to hear what they're speaking about, we also get a chance to see as well. So when I first said this, I want to say see, but radio is an audio medium. I said it used to be, but the world has changed. So radio now is not just about hearing alone, but also about seeing. Maybe not in as formal an environment as you would get in television. So if you watch whether it's CBC's morning program or other programs on other radio stations worldwide, you will see that it's a more casual type atmosphere and environment that everything is conducted within. But it, once again, meets what people want. If you want a younger audience, you must then have formats that they understand, easier for them, and that they like. And CBC Radio certainly has done just that and will continue to add more things to their day, both CBC television and radio. And they have several radio stations, not just one, each one providing content to a different audience. And when I say different audience, because each radio station has a different type of music, perhaps, different types of programming, it is attractive to different demographics. And the same person listening to 98.1 is probably not the same person listening to 100.7. Now, one of the things that you would have seen, and I did see a lot of it on social media coming off of CBC TV8, was the coverage of more local and regional content. Now, people ask why. Why are you looking to do more local and regional content? Why are we not doing more? I think we mentioned one of the foreign offerings that people were very much in tune with and would like to watch. And there's a reason. You don't want to put yourself back $110 million in debt, do you? So certainly local and regional programming at this stage is something that is needed because it fulfills certain objectives. One, it keeps down your cost. Programs out of larger jurisdictions are very expensive, and you certainly do not want to put yourself into any further debt. CBC is going to be run as a self-sufficient entity that's able to pay its bills. And if you're going to do that, you then have to be prudent about what you are offering. So that is one reason. But beyond that, I think CBC TV has a role to play in our society. We do not want to lose what I call the Barbadian identity. Many countries worldwide have grappled with this. They have tried not to be subsumed into someone else's culture, because it has happened. Now, as much as I love the Caribbean, I really believe I'm a Caribbean person. I love it. I love most of the Caribbean islands that I have lived, worked in, visited. I just like the Caribbean. Some people, when they go on vacation, they go up north. When I go on vacation, I go to Caribbean island, because I love the Caribbean. One of my colleagues here is saying St. Lucia. I love St. Lucia. I think St. Lucia's slogan is simply beautiful. And it is simply beautiful. I love St. Lucia. But then again, I love Jamaica. I love Grenada. I just love the Caribbean. Yeah. So, but Barbados is still Barbados. We have to be careful that we do not lose our identity. And how do you lose your identity? By only offering for people what someone else has and not what you have for yourself. And that is always a mistake. Canada, many, many years ago, because they're right next to the United States, and along a whole host of Canada's borders are American cities. So Canada, in their wisdom, ensured that their media houses had to carry a certain amount of content that's Canadian. If you don't, and you just carry the American content, because it has way more people than you, the United States has way more people than Canada, so it has a ability to offer far more programming, then Canada would become the US, wouldn't it? You wouldn't want that. And so the way in which they were able to combat that was by ensuring that their media carried a certain amount of Canadian content. Other countries have done the same thing. Now, Barbados does not want to become, as much as I love Jamaica, Jamaica. Barbados does not want to become Trinidad. Barbados is Barbados. And what do I say when I say Barbados? All the things that make us Bajan. What's Bajan? Some people say flying fish and cuckoo. Some people say pudding and sauce. Some people say Barbados rum. Some people say horse racing, going to the beach, you know, dominoes, road tennis. Some people like to go, you know, Bajans have beach all around, but the time when you see Bajans at the beach the most is on a bank holiday. They don't call it a holiday. Every holiday is a bank holiday. Now, that's when you know, an excursion. People like to get on a bus and drive around, take all the stress out. These are typically Bajan things. Bajans have their own type of music. If you listen to Bajan calypsos, as opposed to those from other Caribbean islands, there's a huge difference in the sound. A huge difference in the sound. There's also a difference in the phrasing and the difference in what we speak about. Now, we have other things that are Barbadian that we have adopted from other places, but they still have a Barbadian twist to them. So if we want young people to know what Barbados is all about and to keep Barbados as a country that has certain ways of looking at life, a certain cultural identity, a certain methodology in our application to our daily lives, you certainly would have to ensure that someone like the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, where you can actually see it, offers Barbadian content. Now, that is a must. I think I've said it before, and I'll say, I think probably for the last time, but my mother's not from Barbados, and the island she's from, I visit all the time. I think I've been there about 4 times in the last 5 or 6 months. And I love the island, but Barbados has a different way of doing things. Barbados is, if you've traveled the Caribbean a lot, you would see that the Barbados that most of us know has a certain level of orderliness to it. That's what I would call it, orderliness to it. When you go in the bank, the lines won't be all out through the door, but you stand up in the line. When you go in the bus stand, the line might be all down the road and all in the sun, but you stand up in the line. That's the Barbadian way. You don't have people, when you're driving your car, weaving in and out the traffic, wiping off your windshield, trying to stick donuts through your window to make you buy it, try to buy shrimp in a little baggie. Somebody selling you juice, somebody selling you water. Then all of a sudden somebody got 4 mangoes pushing through your window, banging on your thing. That's not the Bajan way. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that is not our way. Barbados has a certain way of looking at life, and I think that if we want to preserve what we know to be our identity, what we know to be our values, what we know to be our culture, how we want our children to view this society and this country, we have to ensure that the media of Barbados, and it has to start with the government media of Barbados, play their role in ensuring that that continues by offering local content. Now, what does this local content do for us? One of the things it does, and it's done it for Canada, It allows you to develop a whole industry, something called a film industry. I am 100% committed to assisting in developing a film industry. This is an opportunity for young entrepreneurs to be able to express themselves. Film, like any other cultural endeavor, it gives you the ability to express yourself. It gives you the ability to showcase all sorts of creative expressions, and it is a positive expression of your creativity. And you must have an avenue for the dispersal of that creativity. And certainly, we have something called the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, the only free-to-air entity in Barbados. When you are in a monopolistic situation and you are the only free-to-air entity in any country, you have a social responsibility in any monopolistic situation. And I believe that we have the responsibility to help where we can in developing of the fledgling film industry of Barbados. And that will also help provide some of the much needed local content. Now, I won't go into a whole long dialogue about film, but film is not just a 2-hour or hour and 45-minute feature. Film takes all types of forms, from small, short documentaries to much larger entertainment type programs. So, but nevertheless, I think it is our responsibility to ensure that we play our part there. The other area that I believe that the Ministry of Information through its entities must play a part is in education. Education worldwide has moved to a visual entity. All education is no longer just a matter of picking up a book. Many universities and schools, they have books, but the books are not necessarily one of these. Mr. President, it's not necessarily a book. A book might be one of these. So you have your iPad or you have your tablet or whatever, and you're reading your book. When you go to a classroom, the books are also electronic. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that because it's the same content. Now, do I necessarily want to read everything on my iPad or on my computer? Probably not, because I grew up in the age of this. So sometimes I like to read this, especially when I'm reading for pleasure. I just sit down, I pick a book, and I read it. But nevertheless, we have an opportunity to use our government resources within information to assist education. And I believe that the government has a responsibility once again to ensure that education moves and continues to move in step with what is happening in other parts of the world. Many of our students will not just leave secondary school and go to work. Many of them will go on to tertiary level education, and they may do it abroad in the very environment of which I'm speaking, so that it will be extremely good for them to know what they're facing long before they go there. And we have the responsibility to ensure that everybody knows what's available and what's there, so that they're able then to not have any surprises when they go abroad to further their studies. Now, the last thing I'm going to say about, not the last thing I'm going to say, I know y'all are saying, oh, she said she was going to be brief, but I am going to be brief, my normal brief self. But the last thing I'm going to say about CBC and what I think it can do in its furtherance of what needs to be done within our society is that for many years, for many, many years, government has had a lot of duplication within its entities. And I'm not just talking about information entities, just talking about entities, period. For many years, there are many government entities that do the same thing that other government entities do. So you go one place, you can get this done, you go somewhere else, the same thing, on and on and on. But the same thing in information as well. As I said before, there's a lot of duplication sometimes, and sometimes when government is looking at what is the best spend of its money, what is of the least burden to the taxpayers, you have to take this into account and ensure that you're not burdening people with unnecessary expenses by incurring unnecessary expenses when you have alternatives available to you. And what do I mean when I say that? You have the CBC TV studio. As I said, CBC is the only television station in Barbados. Only free-to-air ability to watch any type of television in Barbados. Where any and everyone can watch it free. Now, if you take that into account, and you know that you have other entities that need to do productions, like the same Government Information Service, there's something called the Media Resource Center out of Education. All these people need studio time to produce some of the many things that I just spoke about earlier. If tomorrow there was an outbreak of chikungunya, and you wanted to show people what they need to do to protect themselves, what they can do if they were sick, and you were doing a short feature, the easiest way to do that, if you're going to want, and you want everybody, no, put it up on television, on social media, wherever, but you produce a program. Now, should government then go and build a studio for GIS for millions of dollars, turn around, go and build a studio for the Media Resource Center for education for millions of dollars, and then you have CBC that's already there? I think not. Government has to start to be responsible and look at these situations where there are duplications, even within the same ministry, and ensure that some of the costs that they're incurring that becomes a burden on the taxpayers is met by sharing their resources. That is how you keep some of these exorbitant overruns within government entities to a much lower level. By looking at these things holistically and recognizing that you have to use the resources that you have in a better way, in a more practical way. And I believe that's one such thing. You know, I keep saying this about CBC, and it's not because I don't like CBC. I love CBC. As I said earlier, I think they have great staff. It's a wonderful place, and I think that they are doing some wonderful things, and they're going to continue to do so. What I guess reason why I'm speaking on this in so much detail is because, as I said earlier, I have traveled the Caribbean. I've worked in many Caribbean islands and lived in many Caribbean countries, even though I would like to think I was 50. I can't remember what it was like to be 50. So the reality is, I remember way back in the 1980s, I used to live in Belize in the late, very early 80s. Belize had no television, zero, no television, no television. If you want to see TV in Belize, you had to live close to one of the borders. Mexico, which is one of their borders, or Guatemala, or Honduras, or one of those borders. And then you might be able to get Spanish television, depending on how far away you live from the border. But there's no TV in Belize. None. I remember when it first came. And that was in the was in the mid-80s. I used to go to St. Lucia. I lived in St. Lucia. Yeah. And in St. Lucia, I'm going out to the mid-80s. Yes, I love St. Lucia too. The mid-80s. St. Lucia used to watch CBC TV 8. That's what I used to watch, I'm telling you. So they would have the signal sent to a repeater in a place called the Morn. If you know St. Lucia, you can see the Morn from all over Castries. There's a place called really high up. Most Barbadians back in the day before they changed the road now, their hearts would be in their mouths when they went up on the Morn. But the reality is they were watching CBC TV 8. So CBC has been around for a long time. But what has changed? What has changed for us in Barbados is that we've had some lost time in the development of media in Barbados by government, which is TV. Now, no one was ever given a TV license, just CBC. So what has that done? Sometimes when you do not open up your market, when you're closed, it actually retards the development of the industry. And it has done that for television in Barbados. When you go to other islands that did not have TV in the 1980s, they now have multiple television stations. St. Lucia has 4. And St. Lucia does not have the population of Barbados. I'm not sure what their economy is like, but I can tell you their population is not our size. Yet they're able to support 4 television stations. Why is that? Because they were able to develop their industry. I remember when television first came to St. Lucia, the first one would have been DBS, as it's known today. It wasn't known by that name at the time because it was a gentleman who was running it, and it had his last name, which I will not say here. But the point is that they have gone way past us when it comes to television, simply because within that country, because the market was open and licenses given, what ended up happening was that that industry there and in many other Caribbean islands has developed. So that is why I'm talking so much on television. There is a real need and necessity to ensure that the market here in Barbados is open. And having said that, it now allows me to move on to another part of the ministry, and that is the Broadcasting Authority. The Barbados Broadcasting Authority is the regulatory agency that regulates radio and television. Now, there's only one TV station, which is CBC, and there's only one technology considered to be broadcasting for now in Barbados, which will be MCTV, which is also owned by CBC. But there are several radio stations. There are 18 radio stations in Barbados. People never knew that. But you know there are 18 radio stations, or 18 entities classified as radio. Because one of them is not really a radio station, it's actually a drive-in. Because they use, correct. So they use spectrum in order to broadcast their signal. So that's classified. So without them, that makes it 17. Then, of course, there's one owned by the government, which right now I think education has been using, but really licensed by Home Affairs, and not used often because it's really used for national emergencies. And then, of course, you have the BBC, which is a non-Barbadian offering, but certainly one that is transmitted here and in other Caribbean islands. So that now brings you down to 15. Now, out of those 15 stations, 4 of them are owned by CBC, which now brings you to 11. Now, out of those 11 stations, 6 of those 11 stations are owned by, 6 people own those 11 stations. And that's it. Because some people have multiple stations. One company has 4 stations, another company has 2 stations, another company has 2 stations. You get the general drift. What has that done? We now have a market where only a certain number of individuals own broadcast medium within our country. And we believe that we have to open broadcasting to other people here. And so we are committed to issuing broadcast licenses. We are committed to issuing radio licenses, and we are committed to issuing television licenses, which all come under the Broadcasting Authority, who has an extremely capable board and chairman. The chairman is herself out of the broadcast environment, and certainly extremely, extremely capable. So we believe that by doing this, it allows other ideas, other ways of looking at broadcasting, which will allow for the development of the industry. I believe that without having that, it continues to retard the industry. You need development, and development occurs by new ideas. Regardless of what endeavor you are looking at, without new ideas, development is then retarded. Now that I am on broadcasting and on licenses, licenses come with a responsibility. I mean, it's not a free-for-all where you just willy-nilly give out a license and there's no responsibility that comes with it. It must, and that's governed by the Broadcast Act and the Regulations 2000, which then says what people who have these licenses are required to do. That act itself will be updated because some of what is contained may not be as relevant as it would have been the last time it was adjusted. Okay, when it was adjusted some years ago, because the last time that would have been amended would have been the Regulations 2000, which is, anybody can help me with my math? So you're talking about, this is now 2019. So you could imagine that in 19 years, technology has changed, for sure. Yeah, in 19 years, technology has changed. And that is true within broadcasting as well. So we certainly are going to want that people, I'm certainly saying that some of what's there will need to be adjusted to keep it in line with current technologies and what is currently happening. Now, the last thing I'm going to say on licenses is everyone who has a broadcast license must pay a fee. Like any other license, I cannot think of a single license in Barbados that you go to get that's free. Not even the bicycle license. Even that you gotta pay for. Yeah, you gotta pay for a bicycle license. You gotta pay for any kind of license, your driver's license, marriage license. I don't know much about the marriage license, but I'm sure someone can tell me the fee. But the marriage license, you gotta pay. Every license you get in Barbados, you have to pay for. But is it not stunning that there are people in Barbados that can have a broadcast license? Everyone here, Mr. President, clearly understands the responsibility that is entrusted in you when you're given a broadcast license. But there are individuals that believe that the license is free. Free. They believe that they don't have to pay their broadcast license. As a matter of fact, there's an entity that hasn't paid their broadcast license, Mr. President, in well over almost a dozen years. Imagine. Can you imagine any license you could get that you don't pay for? And anywhere in the world. I mean, it's by its own definition, it is a license. Someone is giving you the ability and the permission to perform a certain task and not a cent. They seem to believe that broadcasting licenses are free. You know, it's a strange world. In the world of information, people are able to pontificate about all kinds of things. They're involved in all sorts of endeavors. They have an opinion on everything. But when it comes to something as simple as paying a broadcast license, that seems all of a sudden to come up nil. Who would figure it? Who would? Now, I did say it would be brief. So, I am now on my penultimate item, which is social media. But I will be brief with social media. I have to talk about social media. Social media in Barbados needs to be regulated. There is no doubt about it. It has become a pervasive situation of fake news, alternative facts, to the point where they're defaming people, trying to ruin their reputations, hurting them in the family environments, all kind of things. It's got to that point. We cannot just allow it to just get totally out of control. The worst thing you could ever do as a society is to let something get to the point where you're not able to pull it back. And social media has its positives, make no mistake, because we, within the broadcast and within the media and information industry, use it every day. But when a newspaper or a well-known media house uses social media, they tend to be responsible. They're responsible because they're taught responsibility as media practitioners. So they tend to be responsible. So when I say social media, what am I talking about? I'm talking about Facebook. Every media house has Facebook. Almost. Most of them. Majority. WhatsApp. Twitter. Instagram. You all know the social media platforms. And they're prevalent here in Barbados and widely used. But I can say that traditional media houses tend to be responsible when they're using social media. There's no 100%. You don't always get everything 100% right, but you have a level of responsibility. You do not take the social media to go and defame people and put their reputations into question, which is done here all the time with social media. You don't kill off people and put the pictures and circulate it saying that the person is dead. Well, I cannot imagine the horror. I saw a lady speaking about it here just about maybe a week or two ago, that they claim, social media, that she was dead. She wasn't dead. She was very much alive. But what happened to her? The emotional trauma suffered by her and her family had to be horrific. People were calling from abroad, talking to her family, oh, how sorry they were she was dead and this and that. Her own relatives felt, she's dead because they decided that she was dead. They put the picture and all around it went. It became, I think they call it viral. It wasn't viral, it was more like a virus. Because how can you do that to someone? But that's what social media is becoming in Barbados. Then I saw another one where a man is held and beaten by people because he's the person they felt committed a crime. He ain't do nothing. Wrong person, wrong body. You can't do that. When you take up someone and put them on social media and say something about them that is not true to cause people to injure them, physically injure them, there's a great problem with that. Then you see all kind of things about people on social media. If a traditional media house says tomorrow, saying tomorrow is a crook. If they said that, chances are that someone will probably take some type of legal action against them. But what is the difficulty with social media? Not every platform is difficult, because certainly in some platforms you're able to identify the individuals. So something like Facebook, as long as they don't have a fake Facebook page and it really is them, you know who they are. So if they're saying something to you that will defame you and put your reputation into disrepute, you may be able to have some sort of recourse against them. But something like WhatsApp, that is the worrisome one. Why is it worrisome? Because by the time you get the message, you are probably person number 1,000 down the line. So to trace it back, it can be done sometimes, but often you're not able to do so simply because of the sheer number of times that message has been passed around. And it has really hurt some people in this country. And I think that we need to take a look at it and see what can be done in order to ensure that it does not become a situation where it is so detrimental to our society that it does not give the average person the opportunity to live a peaceful enjoyment. Someone said to me, when I spoke to him about it, you know, there is the Computer Misuse Act, and there is such an act. The Computer Misuse Act allows you, and with your permission, Mr. President, I would just like to, the Computer Misuse Act at Section 14 says, where a person uses a computer to send a message, letter, electronic communication, or article of any description that is indecent or obscene, is or constitutes a threat, or is menacing in character, and he intends to cause or is reckless as to whether he causes annoyance, inconvenience, distress, or anxiety to the recipient or to any other person to whom he intends it or its contents to be communicated, he is guilty of an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $10,000 or to imprisonment for a term of 12 months or to both. Yes, so we have the Computer Misuse Act, which will help in some instances, but not in all. Because as I just articulated, you would have to know who the individual or individuals might be, which you don't always get that opportunity to. And that's where the problem becomes difficult for the application of something like this. I know that my fellow Senator McCartney is listening to me, and because most of the platforms used for social media are telecommunications platforms, fall squarely under telecommunications. But there's a content aspect and not just the platform alone that then becomes worrisome. Where we, I think, have fallen down in Barbados is not recognizing the convergence of broadcasting and telecommunications a long time ago. Because we're going back at least 13, 14 years where people would have known that this was what was happening and would occur. But certainly, I think that we need to take a serious look at these social media platforms and the content. And the last thing I'm going to say about it, and I'll then quickly move on, is that I also believe that social media is used for other activities that may not be quite above board. Because some of these platforms give you an anonymity that allows you to be able to communicate amongst yourselves without fear that your messages or what you're doing may be intercepted. Yeah. Now, the last thing I'm going to speak about very quickly is the government printery. The government printery falls under the ministry, and the government printery is one of the entities that too has been neglected. And the government printery is going to need, in my view, some further assistance when it comes to technology. They are still printing in an age of equipment that has not been used by most printeries in many, many years. Certainly, we are looking to change some of the ways in which we print some of the information by putting more information up on electronic platforms, which will then allow for them to have to print less information. And that electronic platform will certainly reduce the workload for them, where the presses that they're using will at least be able to accommodate what they're doing for now, until such a time that better and more modern equipment is available. Now, just to wrap up, certainly the information, as I said, is an area that, if used correctly, can be an area of good for our country. It is an area that can contribute to our social development, it can contribute to our educational development, and it can contribute to our information gathering as a society. And we certainly, within the Ministry of Information, Broadcasting, and Public Affairs, will endeavor to do our best to ensure that in this coming year that we put our best foot forward in contributing to the development of this country. And I am, as I said at the beginning of my speech, 100% in support of the budget. And with that, Mr. Deputy President, I'm obliged to you. Why didn't know he was here? We kept talking.
I recognize Senator Grant as the next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to start, sir, where Senator Moore would have ended and make it absolutely clear to this chamber that I am in full support of this bill. Mr. President, Barbados is at the crossroads. And we are at the crossroads because we have had 10 years of bad government. We have had, sir, 10 years of mismanagement. We have had 10 years of corruption, 10 years of suffering, to the point, sir, that the people of Barbados got tired. There was a sense that the political party in government just wanted to stay on and stay on. And when the people spoke with a very strong voice. Mr. President, being at the crossroads, it requires us to take some very serious decisions. I've said in this chamber before, sir, that it is not an easy road. I've said in this chamber before, sir, that it is not an easy task to have the responsibility to have to engage in the management of a country where the debt was at a high 170% of debt to GDP. And sir, my understanding of that in layman terms is simply this: that if I am earning $100 a month, I am forced to spend $170 in the payment of debt. Everyone knows, sir, that that is not sustainable. The Barbados Labour Party inherited a government where foreign reserves were extremely low. I believe, sir, in the vicinity of about 4 weeks of import cover. When the principle, the international principle, and the international benchmark is that foreign reserves should be at 12 weeks of import cover. I would argue, sir, that for a small open economy such as Barbados, the foreign reserves should probably be a little higher. But we can accept the international benchmark of 12 weeks. But we had a government that saw the reserves dwindle to just 4 weeks. We had a government, sir, that was printing money every single month to pay salaries. And all of us know, sir, that that was not sustainable. It therefore meant that when the Barbados Labour Party came to government, that we had some very serious decisions to make. I must tell you, sir, that I was a little surprised to hear a member of this chamber refer to the budget as a reverse Robin Hood budget. I believe those were the words that he used, the reverse Robin Hood budget. Now, my understanding is in relation to Robin Hood, that Robin Hood robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. And I therefore interpreted what was said to suggest that this government was robbing from the poor and giving to the rich. Sir, I want to say to that honorable member that one of the first things that the Barbados Labour Party did in coming to government was to give civil servants a salary increase. Give to the civil servant for the first time, sir, in 10 years. I would expect that that honorable member, being a trade unionist, would compliment the government for giving the workers money, putting monies in their hands when they would not have been given money for 10 years. Sir, you know, the honorable senator comes into the chamber and criticizes the government about any and everything. And, you know, sometimes he makes me wonder. And I started to reflect. And I thought to myself, you know what? This senator reminds me of a man I once heard about. He went to his doctor. And he said, doctor, there's a problem I have with my wife. She's going deaf. And I need your help. The doctor said, let us first of all find out the magnitude of the problem. He said, go home, stay a distance from her, and ask her a question. And every time you don't get the answer, go a little closer, and a little closer, and a little closer. And the man went home. And he asked his wife, when he got in, she was in the kitchen, and he asked from the door, honey, what are you cooking for dinner? And you get the answer, and you walk a little closer. And he asked her again, honey, what is it you are cooking for dinner? You hear the answer. And he asked that, sir, 10 times. And after the 10th time, and he inched a little closer, he was right there by his wife. And he asked her for an 11th time, honey, what are you cooking for dinner? And she said for the 11th time, I am preparing stewed chicken and rice and peas. You see, sir, it is not the wife who was going deaf. It was the husband. And that is the problem with the senator, because the senator is not listening. The senator refuses to hear the good things that this Barbados Labour Party government is doing on behalf of the workers of this country. Mr. President, sir, in the budget, sir, the Minister of Finance indicated very, very clearly that for those who are earning less than $35,000, they will be getting tax credits. Those, sir, represent those at the lower scale. And the Prime Minister would have, very soon after coming to office, indicated that, yes, there were some difficult decisions that had to be taken, but she would make sure that she would give to the workers something to carry them through. Now, I heard Senator Franklin say in this chamber again that, and imply that it is the workers who have to carry the burden. Sir, today I looked at an online newspaper and saw that a retired banker who is the chairman of a bank that operates in Barbados speak to the pain that the banks have had to endure. The reality is this, sir, that in order to ensure that we save Barbados, in order to ensure that we take this country from the precipice of disaster where the last Democratic Labour Party would have taken us, tough decisions have to be made, but everyone has to share the burden and share the pain. So it is wrong. It is incorrect. It is misleading. It is false. I dare say, sir, it is intellectually dishonest to say that this Barbados Labour Party is putting the burden on the workers, because everyone has to share in the burden, sir. Mr. President, outside of the measures with respect to the personal income, there's also money that is being put back into the economy. The Prime Minister indicated in the budget that VAT refunds will be given. That provides money going into circulation. And that helps, sir, with the recovery process that has to be undertaken in order to save this country. So, sir, when I look at these estimates of revenue and expenditure, they are constructed against a background where there's a very clear understanding that we have to take those decisions which will be able to rescue our country and would be able to put our country on a sustainable growth path. Sir, the estimates of revenue and expenditure are structured in relation to the programs that will be functioning through these estimates, sir, to help us to rebuild a nation and to help us give the opportunity to all Barbadians to be able to develop to their full potential. It does not matter, sir, where you live. It does not matter which school you went to. It does not matter what profession you're in. This is a time when all Barbadians are being asked to put their hands to the till. This is a time when all Barbados is being asked to ensure that you give of your best so that we can rescue this nation and allow Barbados once again the gem of the Caribbean. Sir, that is why the government had to structure the BERT program, the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program. It was critical, sir, to make sure that we choose that road which will take us to economic recovery, which will ensure that we develop along a sustainable path, and which would ensure that all Barbadians are able to benefit. So, Mr. President, I would want Senator Franklin, instead of criticizing all the time, to compliment the government on the good measures that we are instituting. He gets into this chamber, sir. He gets into this chamber and he speaks about the manner in which the Democratic Labour Party functioned in government. He gets into this chamber and he says that somebody should go to Dodds. But at the same time, when measures are being undertaken to rescue this country and to ensure that we go on that sustainable growth path, he, for whatever political reasons, is very critical. Well, this new party thing, I don't know. From what I've heard at this stage, neither fish nor fowl. So I am not sure his political allegiance. But that may be true because we have political leaders now who are without any indication, just leaving the leadership of their parties. So we never know what will happen in the future. But Mr. President, I think it is very important to recognize that if you are at the crossroads, you have to decide the road which you are going to take. And I am very happy that we have a Prime Minister that is not afraid of taking hard decisions. She is not, sir, fiddling. She's making sure every single day that she works in the interest of the people of this country. She is demanding it of her cabinet, and she is demanding it of her parliamentary party, and she is demanding it from all of those who function in government. She is leading, sir, by example. And since the Barbados Labour Party has returned to government, sir, there's a certain measure of confidence that has returned as well. You hear it, sir, on the streets. You feel it, sir. You know, everybody says there is a real change that has taken place. Everybody is happy. I believe, sir, that even Senator Franklin is happy. I believe he is happy too. Yes. I think so. Because he too recognizes that there is substance. Sir, you have a situation where there are investments that are being undertaken. The leader of government business spoke to the issue of Sagicor investing. He also spoke to the wholesaling activity that will be taking place in Kendall Hill, the Koeman mega store in Kendall Hill, which is to the value of about $40 million US. He spoke briefly, sir, about Ross University that is anticipated conservatively to be bringing about $50 million into the economy. That is conservative, sir. Sir, the reason that you are seeing the return of confidence has to do with the fact that people are of the opinion, and rightly so, that the Prime Minister and the Barbados Labour Party will do what is right to save this country, sir. And I am very happy, Mr. President, to be part of this Barbados Labour Party administration. Sir, I do have to say, and I'm going to speak very briefly to this particular issue, I do have to say, sir, that the crime situation in the country does worry me, not only from a tourism perspective, because I believe very strongly that as we seek to build and expand within the tourism sector, that at the same time what we have to do is to make sure that there are benefits for Barbadians. And I'm very concerned, sir, about the crime situation. I believe, sir, that the crime and the serious crimes could impact negatively on all of the work and railroad, the work that is being done within the tourism industry to seek to help to rebuild this nation. You know, Martin Luther King once said that those that love peace must learn to organize as effectively as those that love war. And we have a responsibility, sir, to ensure that we take whatever measures are necessary to rescue this nation, because all Barbadians must feel safe. But Mr. President, I want to spend a few minutes speaking to tourism. And Senator Franklin, in his remarks, made reference to the room rate levy, I believe. And he said that hotels book vacation packages a year in advance. And he said the hotels are forced to absorb the room rate levy, or the people would have to pay. And he also claimed that there are hotels that are using the service charge to pay the room rate levy. Mr. President, I want to say very clearly that I expect that all hotels would abide by the law, and all hotels would pay the room rate levy, and that there would be no hotel that is utilizing the service charge to pay for the room rate levy. I also think I have a responsibility to say that the reason why we have come to the position of an increase of 10% in the VAT and a 75% increase in the room rate levies related to discussions with government. And you know, sir, what I think is very, very important is to know that we have a government that is listening to the people. Yes, I think that is very, very important. Mr. President, sir, the Prime Minister in our mini-budget indicated that on the 1st of January 2020, the VAT would have increased to 20% and that the levies would come to an end. I want to tell this chamber that contrary to what Senator Franklin said in this chamber, the room rate levies are not included in the package offerings of the hotels. They are not included. What happens, sir, is that the hotels in packaging, or the tour operators, better and more rightly said, would package the cost of airfare, would package the accommodation, but it does not include the room rate levy. Sir, you and others would have visited other destinations where you have a rate for a room and then there are a number of charges that are applied. One example that comes to mind is the Bahamas. You get a lot of charges being applied. The Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association would have made representation to the Prime Minister, to the Minister of Tourism, to the Ministry of Finance, and we would have indicated that to double the VAT from 7.5% to 15% would have created a significant increase in price and a significant increase in the packages. At the same time, our visitors had no challenges or no issues whatsoever with the room rate levies. And therefore, we engaged in discussions with the government. And the government accepted our arguments and eventually determined that the VAT would be increased by 10% and the room rate levies by 75%. Now, sir, if you ask me if I would have wanted the room rate levies to increase on the 1st of April, from the perspective of the CEO of the BHTA, I would have to tell you no. But there is a clear understanding and recognition on our part that we do have to make adjustments and that we do have to contribute to ensuring that we are able to save this country. So, Mr. President, I wanted to put that in the correct context because I did not want it to seem that what Senator Franklin was suggesting was in fact correct. So what has happened is that we have had a 75% increase in the levies, yes, and an increase in the VAT to 10% come the 1st of January 2020. And we are committed, sir, to playing our part. Mr. President, while we are speaking about price, though, I have to make this point. It is not only about price competitiveness. We have to ensure that we provide an enhanced experience for those who are visiting Barbados. Sir, it is more about the value for money proposition than it is about price competitiveness. Yes, price competitiveness is important. But what we have to do is to ensure as we compete with the rest of the world, the Maldives, Seychelles, Mauritius, wherever in the world, that we are able from whatever monies we are quoting to give an exceptional experience to our visitors. And I'm happy to say, sir, that the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. is working very closely with the BHTA, working very closely with the Ministry of Tourism, working very closely with the Intimate Hotels of Barbados, working very closely with the Tourism Development Corporation to seek to ensure that we are able to enhance our product offerings so that we give our visitors a much better experience. Sir, I've said in this chamber before that we could engage in the most effective target marketing. We could ensure that we are able to reach all of those potential visitors and bring them here. But the reality is that the moment of truth is represented when they get at the Grantley Adams International Airport. And Mr. President, there are some measures being undertaken to ensure that the experience at the airport is enhanced. As you know, from the 1st of February, the immigration officers stationed at departure, those immigration officers, sir, have moved. Sir, the intention is to increase the number of kiosks which we have. There are presently, sir, 14 kiosks, I believe, in operation. And that number this year, no, there are presently, sir, 16 kiosks in operation. And there will be an additional 14 kiosks added this year in order to provide for easier access and entry for the visitors coming into Barbados. And that number, sir, so we're moving from 16, an additional 14 going to 30, and next year there will be 48 kiosks. And the objective there, sir, is to ensure that passengers coming in can go to the kiosk. In the initial stages, it will start with the CARICOM passengers, but then it will be expanded to include international passengers as well. Mr. President, you would have heard of the recent opening of the area in the vicinity of gates 14 to 16. That area, sir, would have been enhanced, additional seating provided, air conditioning put in. It would have been significantly enhanced. Sir, it is used principally for the air sea transfers, but other passengers can utilize that area as well. In fact, we have had situations where British Airways, where JetBlue, where WestJet, they have asked to utilize that area for their passengers. And I again have to tell this chamber that what is being done there is to enhance the overall visitor experience at the Grantley Adams International Airport. Sir, I can also report, and you may have recently seen, because I believe the tenders notice would have gone out a day or two ago, that there will be an expansion to the regional lounge. At present, sir, the regional lounge accommodates 160 passengers. And the intention is to have that regional lounge expanded, and the regional lounge will be able, when that expansion is completed, and we're anticipating, sir, that that expansion would take about 9 months. We're anticipating, sir, that expansion, when completed, will provide greater concession space. So you will have more food and beverage, and you will have more retail stores. I want, sir, to reiterate a point that was made by the Minister of Tourism. And the point that the Minister of Tourism made was that the concessions at the airport, that they must provide opportunities for the ordinary Barbadian man and the ordinary Barbadian woman. You see, I stress that, sir, because I want Senator Franklin to know that we are empowering ordinary Barbadians. That is our commitment, to work with and to support ordinary Barbadians. Mr. President, while that expansion is being undertaken, the same area that I spoke to before, gates 14 to 16, that area that has been enhanced, that area will then be used for the regional, as the regional lounge, regional terminal, to facilitate passengers traveling in the region. It is important that we are able to continually enhance the experience that is taking place at the Grantley Adams International Airport. As you know, sir, it is the intention of government to allow a private entity to operate the Grantley Adams International Airport. The leader of government business in his remarks would have made reference, for example, to Heathrow, that is operated by an African. Operated, sir, not by someone that is British, but operated, sir, by an African. And the point I think that is very important to make is this. Sir, the airport ain't going away. No one can take up the airport and carry it anywhere. But what we can do is to ensure that we are able to partner with an entity that can expand the airport and to provide us with some of those amenities that are required. And I heard Senator Wiggins, during her presentation, ask a question in relation to jet bridges. And jet bridges is something that I am anticipating that, in partnership with the entity that will have the operations of the airport will be provided. Because the reality is that we don't have all of the resources. But what we can do is that we can partner with an entity, we can set the performance criteria to ensure that when the airport comes back fully to government, that it is an enhanced airport. So, sir, that is extremely important. Mr. President, sir, as you know, there can be really no effective tourism development without airlift. Being on an island and not having airlift to develop your tourism is really a non-starter. And I think it is important that the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. is complimented for the significant work they have been doing in expanding airlift coming into Barbados. Sir, when I go to trade shows, be it World Travel Market, be it CHTA Marketplace, be it ITB in Berlin, Barbados, sir, is still a top-of-mind destination and a destination sought after. Sir, of course, when we speak sometimes about tourism and we speak about our source markets, we speak about the United Kingdom, we speak about the USA, we speak about Canada. But the truth is, an important source market as well is the Caribbean. And that brings me, sir, to make a few comments in relation to LIAT. Sir, LIAT as a carrier in the region, for many of our CARICOM partners, provides major airlift for them. LIAT, sir, for some of our destinations in the Caribbean, and I can speak to some, sir, having myself worked in one as CEO of the Tourism Authority and relating with other counterparts. LIAT, sir, brings in for many destinations in the region the majority of the visitors that they have. Therefore, I say this, that LIAT is an important carrier. And I do not believe that we can allow LIAT to fail. But sir, as I say that, I also want to make the point that every government has to play its part. The reality is this, sir. Airlift coming into many of our CARICOM countries, that airlift is supported by either minimum revenue guarantees or supported by cooperative marketing. The reality, though, is that the major carriers coming in are given support by regional governments. There was a time, sir, when a former Minister of Tourism in one of our Caribbean countries made it absolutely clear that he would not support LIAT. And instead, he gave support to American Eagle. And American Eagle, yes, sir, went to his destination, and then they pulled out. And he had still to rely on LIAT. I think it is very important that all of our CARICOM countries recognize the importance of LIAT as a regional air carrier and that all of them support LIAT. Mr. President, I'm not suggesting in any way that whatever practices may be occurring and whatever bad management may be taking place should be allowed to continue. But I do think that it is important for all regional governments to give support. The reality is this, that LIAT is operating as a public good. If LIAT had to function on a truly commercial basis, the truth is that there are some destinations that would not get any support from LIAT. And I hear, sir, people talking about how you can bring in other airlines and how ineffective LIAT is. I have to say, Mr. President, that Over the last few years, the operations of LIAT has improved. Sir, I remember once, sir, I was traveling to Grenada, and I got to the airport early, checked in, and then I went and I did a few things. The flight, I think, sir, was leaving at like 12:20, and I got back to the airport going through security, and I heard my name. This is the final boarding call for Mr. Rudy Grant. And I rushed and I said, but it ain't 12, nothing 12:20 yet, but I still got time. And I rushed, and when I got on the aircraft, the agents on the aircraft said, no, they can left you, you was the only man we waiting on. Liat was on time. On time. Sir, there was another occasion, and you must not think that I am the one responsible for keeping back the aircraft. There was another time I was leaving Grenada. Again, sir, on time. And as I approached the airport, one of my staff called me and asked, Mr. Grant, where are you? I said, well, I'm here at the airport. I'm going through security now. She said, this plane can leave you. Liat ready to go. I said, man, you making sport, man.
Minibus style.
Huh?
Minibus style.
Yeah, that's right, minibus style. Ready to go, full up and ready to go. And I said, man, you making sport, there's still time. And she laughed. I said, you must not make this kind of sport at me. I went through security, gone in, but I seen a Liat plane. Huh? The Liat plane started to taxi away. Luckily for me, they had miscounted in terms of the passengers. So they had to come back. And I was fortunate, sir, to get on that flight to Barbados. But the point is that Liat has been improving. But you know what, sir? I know of airlines that came into the region to put Liat out of business. I remember it well. Sir, where are those airlines today? They are not there with us. Sir, I would argue that it is not as profitable as people think in terms of operating an airline in the region. And I would argue, sir, that if it was, that what would happen is that you would see more airlines wanting to operate intra-regional support airlift services. So I am making a call, sir, that support is given to Liat. I think, sir, that we will make a significant error if Liat is allowed to fail. Mr. President, we have been seeing overall in our tourism increasing arrival numbers. And as I speak about the increasing arrival numbers, I have to say that the market, sir, is changing. We are having people who are booking a lot later, so the booking pattern is changing. We are having people who are interested more in the authenticity of our destination. And that is why Oistins is a significant tourism center. You have visitors, sir, and I've said it in this chairman before, you have visitors on the West Coast. They're paying, sir, $3,000 US a night. And on Friday nights, they get in a bus and they go to Oistins. They get in a minibus and they go to Oistins. They get in a taxi and they go to Oistins. The reality is that in Oistins, you really get a flavor of Barbados. In Oistins, you are exposed to the true authenticity of Barbados as a destination. And I'm happy to say that I know that the government of Barbados will be taking some measures to enhance the operations at Oistins. That is important. We have to ensure continually that we are able to properly provide for enhance and improve visitor experience. Of course, sir, one of our brand elements relates to our cleanliness. And I'm going to spend a little time speaking to the Sanitation Service Authority. And again, sir, I want to reflect on the words of Senator Franklin when he talked about the SSA workers working on weekends and at night, and that the government wants them to work any 5 days out of 7. And that is true. The reality is that the Sanitation Service Authority is required to collect garbage every single day. The reality also is, sir, that the Sanitation Service Authority is now required to function its operations from the garbage and sewage contribution. Over the last 7 months, sir, we would have collected, or received, I should say, because the collection is being done by the Barbados Water Authority. Over the last 7 months, we would have received approximately $26.5 million. Sir, the expectation was, and that figure, sir, may change slightly because we may get a few more dollars from the Water Authority in relation to the month of March. So that figure may change slightly, but it is not going to change significantly. We would have anticipated, sir, based on what the projections were with respect to the GSC, that we would receive $35 million. Now, Mr. President, I had a chief technical officer when I was parliamentary secretary in the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport. And I was given direct responsibility for international transport. So every single week, I met with the senior officials at the airport. I met one to discuss the expansion of the Grantley Adams International Airport, and I met to discuss the operations of the airport and how we could enhance the experience. And I remember requesting and requiring that certain things be done by the technical division. And the response from that person, sir, was, Senator Grant, I can't give you a cupful out of a table. It is as what Senator Greenwich would have indicated. You can't get a gallon out of a jill tart. And therefore, if we are going to effectively carry out the mandate that is required of the Sanitation Service Authority, it means that we do have to get all of the workers on board. Now, sir, do I believe that the workers are doing a good job? Yes, sir. Do I believe that we have to find ways in which to enhance the environment that the workers are in? Yes, sir. Do I believe, sir, that we have to relate to the workers very clearly as to how very important they are? Yes, sir. But, sir, at the end of the day, we have to function out of the GSC, and the reality is we therefore will have some serious decisions to make. Mr. President, if we have any 5 out of 7, and before I make that point, let me say that when you look at the state-owned enterprises, sir, you know that probably the only state-owned enterprise where there has not been a retrenchment of workers is at the Sanitation Service Authority. Sir, I'm willing to take my seat if Senator Franklin would get up and say that what I'm saying is incorrect. Would you believe that the only entity, sir, there has been absolutely no retrenchment of workers at the Sanitation Service Authority? Our desire is to ensure that we are able to keep those men and women working. Sir, they are important to us. They are very important to us, sir. Very, very important. the workers, and if Senator Franklin feels that I'm saying that is something that is misleading, he said he should get up and say so. But I will come into this chamber, sir, and I will speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So, sir, I want to ask the Sanitation Service Authority workers to come on board with us. And let us ensure that we are able to provide the services required from the SSA. And let us, at the same time, look to see how we could enhance their functioning and their existence. I have to say, sir, that my colleague was correct when she said that there are 5 new trucks here. Those trucks we expect to go into operation very shortly. As you would have known from before, there were 2 medium-sized trucks. They have already been put into operation. We now have 5 large compactor trucks that are here, and they will soon be in operation as well. Mr. President, I have to tell you that in order to supplement the work and to supplement the equipment of the Sanitation Service Authority, we engage the services of waste haulers, private waste haulers, private waste haulers. And I have to remind the chamber of this fact, that when we came to office, we determined that we would renegotiate all of the contracts. And as it relates to the private waste haulers, we reduced their contracts by more than 50%. By more than 50%. And I have to say, sir, that when we have the trucks operating, that we would no longer need to engage the private waste haulers. We have had discussions with them. We've had discussions with them, sir. And once we have those trucks operating, and once we are able to have them in our schedule, then we will move on. The reality is, sir, that we are going to carry out the operations of the Sanitation Service Authority out of the GSC as required. Mr. President, I also have to tell you that there's a company called SBRC. There was a lot of talk. I mean, the last government, sir, paid to SBRC an amount of $2 million a month. Sir, and I agree with Senator Franklin, and $2 million a month. I don't normally agree with a lot of what Senator Franklin says, but he did utter the words. Sorry, I know I should not hear sighs. He did utter the words, a shame. Because the reality is that what happened in this country under the last government is that they raped this country, sir, of its resources. What happened under the last government, sir, is that there was a lot of corruption that took place. The leader of government business, when he was introducing the bill, made reference to the fact that those in the last government said that they wouldn't, what was it? He said they wouldn't lie, cheat, or steal. And sir, when he said that, I remembered the words of a song. I think the calypsonian was Lord Nelson, and I think the song was King Lear. And Lord Nelson was speaking about the best liars in the Caribbean coming together. And I say to this chamber that the last government, the officials in the last government, in terms of the political directive, they were some of the biggest liars you could ever come across. And the truth is, sir, if they were to engage in such a competition, I believe, sir, that they would have won that competition hands down. But I also want to remind my colleagues that in that song, King Lear, that Lord Nelson said this: you hear a lie, that is lie. Teacher Percy said, when you tell a lie, you're going to hell as soon as you die. Sir, you know what? The truth is that when I die, and when most of us die, I expect that we will go to heaven. And unfortunately, those that are in hell, we would not see. But the reality, sir, is this: that statements were made by the Democratic Labour Party politicians that they knew were not correct and that they had no intention of ever keeping. And I don't want to really get sidetracked, but just to say this, sir, that when they spoke of the fatted calf and sharing the fatted calf, the intention was then, and it was very clear, and it came out in their practice, that what they would do is that they would share the fatted calf amongst themselves. All of them, sir. All of them ministers that were in the Democratic Labour Party, they would share those resources among themselves and rape the country. And therefore the fatted calf is no longer, the fatted calf is no more. But I am confident, sir. I am confident, sir, that the Barbados Labour Party will nourish this nation state. And once again, there will be a fatted calf. And that once again, all Barbadians will be able to benefit. But let me, sir, get back to the SBRC. The contract provided for a payment of $2 million a month. We, sir, renegotiated that to $915,000 a month. A significant reduction, sir. It represents, sir, an amount of about $1,185,000 a month, $13,020,000 a year savings to the people of Barbados. And what we are seeking to ensure too, sir, is that if there are any bad practices, that those bad practices are removed. There's an administrative building at Vaucluse. And every time I speak to the manager of the SSA, every time I speak to the other directors at the SSA, I tell them that my heart hurts me. Because there is this building at Vaucluse that is just there, that is not being occupied. And the truth is, the location is not the right location. The structure of the building is not the right building. But, sir, if we have to, we're going to have to bite the bullet. And SSA may have to take some of its operations there. Because the reality is, for me, that we cannot have a building where the people of Barbados has to meet expenses through the SSA, and that building is not being occupied. But it saddens me. You had a situation, sir, with respect to that building where there was I think he was a project manager, very closely affiliated to someone from the center of Barbados, Central Barbados, in St. Michael, some part of St. Michael. He was associated with this individual. And this person carried out services as a project manager. And do you know, sir, that that person billed the Sanitation Service Authority for the same work that they're carrying on already? They wanted money twice for the same work. And that is only to reflect, sir, on the fact that, as Serenada said, a lot of steel in there. A lot of steel in there. But, sir, We give you the assurance that we will eliminate those bad practices. Let me say, sir, that the tenders with respect to the Sanitation Service Authority, that those tenders for an additional 12 garbage trucks, those tenders, sir, have been approved by the ministry, and very shortly we will be engaging in the action necessary to bring new trucks here as well. And sir, it is not only the trucks. There's other equipment that is needed as well. Skip removers that we will be as well utilizing, because it is important to give the equipment necessary to SSA for SSA to carry on with the job. Sir, I have to say, sir, that some of those compactor trucks, yes, sir. Sir, are you signaling to me that there's still more time? I saw you pointing at your watch. You're saying, take my time, there's still more time, sir? I'm drawing here. Okay. Okay, sir. I have to say that a few of those trucks will be used for the separation of garbage. It is very important that we are able to, no matter what type of recycling is done, and our parent ministry will give guidance in relation to that. I know that the Cabinet of Barbados will be soon looking at that. And whatever type of recycling, though, is determined, sir, we have to have the necessary equipment, and we have to have those compartmentalized trucks. So we have already, sir, within the tenders, identified compartmentalized trucks, and we will be utilizing those. Sir, the other topic I want to touch on briefly relates to waste energy. And we do have to make a determination how we will proceed in that regard. There's the opportunity for us to work with an entity such as Arawak Cement to determine if we would have a co-generation plant. We will also have to determine if we don't go that route, if we would have to set up on our own. Of course, when I speak to waste energy, I hear the words Kiehil, Kiehil, Kiehil. And sir, let me give the assurance that nothing that we do will represent what would have occurred, the disaster, sir, that occurred with Kiehil. So, Mr. President, I just wanted to give an indication as to what we are doing in the areas of tourism, in the areas of sanitation, to identify that overall we are seeking to build a nation for everyone, seeking to make sure that even though we are in a difficult area and at a difficult time, that everyone has to play their part. Sir, you know, there's a saying that everyone wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. The reality is, Mr. President, that we all have to play our part. We all have to contribute. We all have to make some sacrifice. And the reality is, as Bob Marley said in song, when the rain falls, it don't fall on one man's housetop. The reality is all of us are in this together. The reality is that all of us must put our hands to the till. The reality is that all of us, sir, must ensure that we give of our very best to ensure that this nation is once again the shining and bright light of the Caribbean. For, sir, one bee cannot build a hive. One ant cannot build a colony. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Mr. President, I move that this session be suspended for 15 minutes.
session be now suspended for 15 minutes, returning at 5:30. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. We are now in suspension for until 5:30.